Good evening and welcome to NTD News. I'm Stephanie Cox. Here are today's top stories. Beginning with the 2022 midterm elections, Texas and Florida will gain more seats in Congress, while California and New York are among 7 Democratic strongholds to lose seats. The White House defends President Biden's proposal to almost double the tax rate on capital gains. Biden is expected to speak more about this on Wednesday. Police body cam footage showing the events leading to Andrew Brown Jr.'s death released to his family. Attorneys say they should see all the footage, while the mayor declares a state of emergency. Violent anarchists continue to terrorize residents in Seattle, this time shutting down an event at a local church by threatening to burn down the building and harm church leaders. And millions are missing their second vaccine shot. The CDC says 8% aren't coming back for another dose. It looks like the political power may be shifting to the South this decade. According to the 2020 census data released today, states with a Republican stronghold are gaining congressional seats as historically Democrat states lose seats. NTD's Lynn has those details.
The data from the 2020 U.S. Census Bureau are out, and it's looking like the Electoral College and House seats are changing. That's because the 435 House seats are distributed among the states based on their population, and this impacts the number of electoral votes each state gets as well. Beginning with the 2022 midterm elections, 6 states will gain congressional seats and electoral seats. These states are Texas, Colorado, Florida, Montana, North Carolina, and Oregon. Several are considered Republican strongholds. Former President Trump won 5 of these states in the 2020 election. On the other hand, 7 states will lose 1 seat until the next census in 10 years. They are California, Illinois, Michigan, New York, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and West Virginia. Notably, California is losing a House seat for the first time, dropping from 53 to 52 members. The population of the United States grew to about 331.5 million residents over the last decade, increasing 7.4% from 2010. It is the slowest growth rate of any 10-year period since the 1930s. The Census Bureau will release redistricting details by September 30th. Lynn, NTD News.
This week, President Biden will lay out the details of his American Family Plan and the tax increases to pay for that. The media got a preview of Biden's talking points today.
On Monday, the director of the National Economic Council said that President Biden's plan to hike capital gains tax will only affect a small percentage of U.S. taxpayers, those who make $1 million a year.
We're talking about 0.3%. That's about 500,000 households in the country that we're talking about.
Biden is expected to address to a joint session of Congress this Wednesday. He'll detail his American Families Plan and will reportedly propose a sharp rise in the top capital gains tax rate to 39.6%. Trump's economic advisor Larry Kudlow slammed Biden's tax policies last week. He said if the administration raises the capital gains tax, there will be less investment, productivity, wages, family income, and growth. But Deese defended the plan. He says the plan will bring fairness and there is no evidence the tax rates will have a significant impact on long-term investment.
You can't identify a meaningful correlation between the two.
Republican Congressman Kevin Brady told Fox Business that Biden's plan is punishing the economy, and these tax hikes will have a negative impact on small businesses and blue-collar workers. Brady says House Republicans will fight tooth and nail against tax hikes.
And President Biden today signed an executive order to strengthen labor unions. He's creating a task force that will work to increase union membership and help unions organize by mobilizing the federal government's policies and programs. And Biden will deliver a joint session address to Congress on Wednesday night on the eve of his 100th day in office. About 200 guests will be allowed in, all invite only, no guests allowed.
Typically, all members of Congress and their guests can attend the president's joint address. However, this year, the address will look different. Only about 200 people will be invited into the House chamber. No lawmakers are allowed to bring guests. According to a memo from the acting House Sergeant at Arms, any members who have not received an invite from their congressional leadership will not be permitted in the Capitol after 5 p.m. Wednesday. New York Representative Claudia Tenney and several other Republicans voiced concerns. According to the New York Post, they wrote a letter to House Speaker Nancy Pelosi saying, "In our nation's history, it is unprecedented to convene a joint session of Congress such as this without extending an invitation to all members of Congress." The House and Senate have more than 500 members. While senators are in Washington this week, the House is not in session. Most House lawmakers are working in their local districts. President Biden is set to deliver his first address to Congress on Wednesday at 9 p.m., the night before his 100th day in office. South Carolina Senator Tim Scott will deliver the Republican Party's response to Biden's address.
The Supreme Court will not rule on a case that seeks to revive a Trump-era immigration mandate. If won, the case would put new restrictions on immigrants who may get government benefits. Public charge is an immigration rule that allows the U.S. government to deny a visa to anyone who's likely to become dependent on government aid. The Biden administration did away with this rule. When that happened, a group of 14 states, led by Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, decided to ask the Supreme Court to revamp Trump's enhanced public charge rule. But the court is declining to weigh in on the issue for now, instead leaving the door open for lower court level to rule on the matter. Today, Vice President Kamala Harris spoke with Guatemala's president about working together on mitigating the migration surge. But 10 Republican senators are urging the Biden administration to do more. Senator Ted Cruz and 9 other Republican senators sent a letter to Biden today urging him to address the crisis at the southern border. NTD's Melina Weiskup has more details.
It is my honor to be
Vice President Harris's approach to solving the crisis at the border is to work closely with the leaders in the Northern Triangle, with hopes of addressing the root causes of migration, what she's listed as food insecurity, poverty, and drought. She spoke with Guatemala's president Monday about how the U.S. could help the country solve these internal issues.
When we last spoke by telephone a few weeks ago, we discussed our shared commitment to expanding opportunities in Guatemala and throughout the region.
Harris is set to meet with Guatemalan community leaders to hear their input too. But for Republicans, this is a far cry from what's needed. 10 Republican senators led by Senator Ted Cruz are calling on Biden to begin a dramatic change of course to humanely secure the southern border. The senators want Biden to implement policies that will deter migrants from making the dangerous trek to the border, saying that path is rampant with rape, sex trafficking, and child abuse. During their March trip to the border, a Customs and Border Patrol agent told the senators that the border on the Mexican side is closed. No one crosses without the permission of the cartels. In their letter to Biden, the senators say witnessing it was different, from the coyotes heckling border agents on the ground, to the health and humanitarian hazards of the processing area, to the terrified and confused children in the unsanitary and crowded conditions. Republicans have repeatedly called on Biden and Harris to go see the situation firsthand, but Harris says these calls are nothing more than political games.
Now, Republicans are attacking you, saying you shouldn't be in New Hampshire talking about infrastructure, you should be in the southern border talking about immigration. How do you respond to them?
I'm not going to play political games.
Harris hasn't planned a trip to the border, but will go to Guatemala and Mexico in June. Melina Weiskup, NTD News.
The election audit in Arizona is taking place right now, but a local judge is recusing himself from a legal challenge to the audit. He was the judge who asked the Arizona Democrat Party to pay a $1 million bond in order to pause the audit last week. NTD's Allison Lee has the latest.
Maricopa County Superior Court Judge Christopher Corey is recusing himself from a lawsuit challenging the Arizona State Senate's election audit. The audit involves 2.1 million ballots and close to 400 tabulators in the 2020 presidential election in Arizona's largest county. The recusal comes after Corey learned that attorney Chris Viskovich is joining the case. According to the order of recusal first obtained by 12 News, Viskovich worked for the judge as an extern within the past 5 years. He is representing security firm Cyber Ninjas. That's one of the firms the Senate hired to conduct the audit. The election audit began last week, and last Thursday, the Arizona Democratic Party filed a lawsuit seeking to stop the audit. They sued the Republican Senate leadership and security firm Cyber Ninjas. They allege that the audit violates state law, lacks various safeguards, and would undermine the integrity and security of the state's elections. A day later, Corey granted the Arizona Democratic Party's request to pause the audit, but asked for a $1 million bond. The Democratic Party refused to pay, and the audit went on undisrupted. The Republican-controlled Arizona State Senate ordered the audit in January, saying this would bolster public confidence in election results. The Arizona Democratic Party calls it a sham audit. Former President Donald Trump is also chiming in. He is asking the Arizona governor to send state police or National Guard to protect those conducting the audit. The audit will take around 2 months to complete. Allison Lee, NTD News.
The family of Andrew Brown Jr. today reviewed some of the police body camera footage from his fatal shooting. But the family's attorneys say they only saw a small portion of the footage and are demanding more. The mayor declared a state of emergency ahead of possible civil unrest after the public sees the footage. NTD's Kevin Hogan has more.
20 seconds is not transparency.
Police released part of the body cam footage of 42-year-old Andrew Brown's death to his family on Monday. One of the family's attorneys, Ben Crump, said they only saw 20 seconds of body camera footage from one officer and weren't allowed to see the footage from other officers. Attorney Harry Daniels is demanding to see more.
The county attorney said, I'm only going to show you the pertinent parts. So the pertinent parts was 20 seconds of them, not the part that they would shoot before the video came on. So no, the pertinent part is the client, Mr. Brown getting shot at before the video starts. But they didn't want to show that to us. No.
Brown was allegedly shot and killed by police on Wednesday, April 21st in Elizabeth City, North Carolina. The county sheriff said Brown was killed by deputies after they served him with a search warrant. Demetria Williams, an eyewitness, told the Associated Press that Brown was shot while trying to drive away. Protesters called on officials to release the police body cam footage to the public. The city's mayor, Betty Parker, comments on the protests that followed the incident.
Our city police deal with the protesters and what have you, but they have been, thus far, they've been very orderly. We haven't had any major problems.
The county attorney said faces were blurred in the body cam footage to protect an active investigation as per state law. 7 deputies involved were placed on administrative leave following the incident, and 3 left the force voluntarily. When asked if they will be able to see more of the footage later, one of the family's attorneys said the county attorney is going to court on Wednesday. Kevin Hogan, NTD News.
Turning Point USA founder Charlie Kirk was meant to be speaking at a local church in Seattle, Washington, but the event was canceled after violent anarchists threatened to burn the church down and harm its leaders if the event went ahead. NTD's Eileen Ang brings us more.
On Sunday, Charlie Kirk posted a video responding to a church event he was supposed to speak at. Threats forced the event to be canceled.
I'm not going to lie. I was supposed to go to Seattle, Washington, speak at a church, talk about the Bible, liberty, freedom, our nation.
The event was called An Afternoon with Charlie Kirk. It was scheduled on May 2nd at Motion Church, south of Seattle. But on Friday, the church announced the cancellation. The pastor cited lack of police protection and violent threats against Kirk and the church.
Radical terrorist mobs, like the ones that rallied in Capitol Hill in Seattle, they sprung into action. They sprung with threatening declarations. They vowed to not only burn our properties to the ground, but also brought threats of physical violence against our church leadership, our neighbors, their properties, and basically wreak havoc in our community. This precious community that we love.
Kirk praised the pastor for his decision to put the public's safety first. He criticized the government for not doing its job.
I guess the new blueprint is get 1,200 people in masks with weapons and the event can get canceled. That is not a government that protects our natural rights. That is a government that panders to the people in the streets that are willing to use violence as a means for political power.
Kirk concludes by urging viewers to share the video. He apologized for not being able to go to the event. Eileen Ang, NTD News, California.
The mayor of Portland, Oregon, is striking a new tone after months of riots in the city. He's calling on residents to help unmask the people behind the ongoing violence. He also extended the city's state of emergency over the weekend.
Scenes like this have become the norm in Portland, but on Friday, Mayor Ted Wheeler made his most urgent appeal yet. He's asking the public to help take back the city.
We must stand together as a community against this ongoing criminal intimidation and violence.
Wheeler's asking residents to help authorities put an end to the nightly violent protests and riots that have plagued the city for nearly 11 months. Whoever has information about the self-described anarchists committing these crimes are being urged to contact the police. But Wheeler made it clear he isn't asking citizens to become violent or confront people themselves.
Our job is to unmask them, arrest them, and prosecute them.
The mayor's previously been accused of not doing enough to stop the violent riots in his city and of being too sympathetic toward the rioters, who usually claim they're advocating for justice or protesting against police brutality. But Wheeler said on Friday the rioters don't want things to improve in Portland.
The city is beginning to recover, but self-described anarchists who engage in regular criminal destruction don't want things to open up, to recover. They want to prevent us from doing the work of making a better Portland for everyone. They want to burn, they want to bash.
Portland's dealt with unrest since the spring of 2020. Many of those who've committed crimes are members of the far-left anarcho-communist network, Antifa. Others have identified as Black Lives Matter activists. However, most of those arrested and charged haven't faced punishment because the area's top prosecutor declined to pursue the charges. Portland's acting police chief said Friday a number of the violent rioters have already been arrested at least once before.
We're seeing a lot of the same people at these events night after night after night. Several people have been arrested now more than once for crimes ranging all the way from disorderly conduct to arson and even attempted murder.
He says the district attorney's office is reviewing cases prosecutors previously dismissed if the alleged wrongdoers are arrested again. The mayor says prosecutors and law enforcement leaders have all agreed to hold those who violate the law accountable.
A former Virginia Tech soccer player is suing her coach, saying she was forced from the team because she didn't kneel during a game last fall. Kirsten Henning was on Virginia Tech women's soccer team from 2018 to 2020. In the federal lawsuit filed last month, Henning said she remained standing while many of her teammates knelt during a pregame demonstration, and that she was verbally attacked by the coach, Charles Adair. Henning claims Adair continued to target her and benched her due to their different political views. In the lawsuit, Henning said she supports social justice and believes that Black Lives Matter, but she does not support BLM, the organization, such as its radical positions on defunding the police and eliminating the nuclear family. Henning is looking for rejoining the team and ordering Adair to undergo First Amendment training. NTD reached out to Virginia Tech, but the university declined to comment. And House Republicans in New Hampshire are taking aim at critical race theory. 3 Congress members are proposing a bill that effectively bans the theory and the state's dealings and training programs. Rally-goers in Concord, New Hampshire spoke out against what they call indoctrination stemming from the theory.
The New Hampshire bill prevents certain divisive concepts based on race and sex from spreading in state contracts, grants, and training programs. One of the bill's sponsors is Republican Representative Keith Ammon, who spoke at a rally on Saturday. He addresses some of the criticism of the bill he is trying to advance in the state's House.
The opponents of the bill they're outright lying about what the bill does. They're saying silly, ridiculous things about it. It'll prevent teaching of women's suffrage or the Holocaust or the history of slavery in the U.S. All that is bunk. It's all just a smokescreen. Don't listen to it, because if you just read the bill, you can see that all those things are not true.
Critical race theory has roots in Marxism. Proponents of the theory see race, gender, and other identities as social constructs that support systems of oppression, according to the Heritage Foundation. But one of the rally attendees, Lily Tang Williams, warns Americans about the theory. She highlights similarities between the theory and tactics Mao Zedong used to gain power during the Cultural Revolution in China.
In Cultural Revolution, they divided people into 5 red and 5 black classes, right? And they in critical race theory, and they divided people into oppressor groups and oppressed groups. So if you are white, male, and question conservatives, and then you belong to oppressors groups. So I just don't like that division because it sounds familiar to me. It's just divide and conquer.
Another attendee who goes by Barbara from Harlem speaks out against critical race theory.
This critical race theory is not based on any godly principles. It's man-made, it's made up, and it teaches racism. You know, they act like this country is so racist you can't make it here. Well, you know, tell people like Oprah that you can't make it here. LeBron James, all of these people are living very successful lives because of the opportunities here in America.
The bill effectively bans the theory by prohibiting dissemination of concepts in certain state government communications that say one race or sex is inherently superior to another, or that New Hampshire or the United States is inherently racist. The bill is currently in the state Senate.
You may have gotten the shot, but what about the second? The CDC says nearly a tenth have not. NTD's Miguel Moreno has that update and more.
The CDC says nearly 8% of vaccinated people, nearly a tenth, are missing their second dose of either the Moderna or Pfizer vaccine. About 140 million have gotten at least one dose, putting the number of vaccines missed in the millions. Dr. Anthony Fauci says he's not surprised.
Whenever you have a 2-dose vaccine, you're going to see people who, for one reason or other, convenience, forgetting, a number of other things, just don't show up for the second vaccine.
A number of other things could include the thought that one is enough. Oxford University has studied the protection of just one dose. They recently found that one dose of the Pfizer vaccine offered 65% protection against COVID-19 symptoms. Not as strong as 2 doses, but significant protection. And here's an update on India. President Biden's committed to sending the country oxygen supplies, materials to make vaccines, and more. This came after Biden's call with Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. The second wave is hitting India hard, with over 300,000 cases reported every day for almost a week now. But deaths significantly lower. Latest data showing some 2,800 in the 1.4 billion strong nation. Either way, some hospitals are packed. In some cases, people are being turned away because there's no room or no medical supplies. According to India Today, top doctors like Dr. Randeep Guleria of New Delhi are urging people to stay calm. They say most patients can recover at home and that the panic can add unnecessary pressure to an already strained healthcare system.
अभी अगर हम हालात देखें तो एक unnecessary panic है सब लोगों में.
There's an unnecessary panic among the public, and it is causing more harm than good. Anyone who is COVID positive, even if their saturation is normal and they have no symptoms, they panic.
The World Health Organization says there's a variant spreading in India that may be more contagious than the wild-type virus, but they haven't said whether this new variant is behind the surge. Steph, back to you.
Thanks, Miguel. And coming up, New York City's gun violence has hit an all-time high for the year. The mayor has revealed a plan to stop the gun violence, but will it be enough? And a group of parents in Indiana is calling on grassroots support to fight back against education indoctrination. More in just a moment here on NTD News. Police responded to almost 24 shootings in New York City this past weekend. The spike in shootings occurred just days after the mayor released his plan to prevent gun violence. NTD's Jason Perry has the story.
NYPD responded to 23 shootings throughout New York City just in this past weekend alone. This ended the bloodiest week for New York City this year, with over 50 people shot in 46 separate incidents. Many New Yorkers were unaware of the recent spike in shootings, and they have mixed feelings in regards for personal safety.
I think it's safe. That's all that matters.
I mean, I feel like the numbers of shootings pretty much stay the same every year. I mean, America is a violent place.
You never want to walk somewhere and have to worry that you might just die from some guy with a gun.
Mayor de Blasio says the pandemic has affected New York City's legal system in preventing gun violence.
We finally have the court system coming back. We've just gotten that news in the last few days. Court system will be back strong in the month of May. That's what we've been needing. We have gun prosecutions ready to go that are going to take a lot of the worst actors out of the equation.
Mayor de Blasio says Safe Summer NYC is the roadmap to help end gun violence and to bring the city back stronger than ever. But some argue that many of these same policies were implemented last summer under a different name, and they failed to slow the violence. Jason Perry, NTD News, New York.
And with the rise in crime in the city, some are especially worried about safety on public transport. In particular, the metro has seen more murders and other types of attacks. NTD's Arian Pazdar has the story.
New York City transit unions have been asking for more police at subway stations. Now another union has joined their calls. This one represents workers who had to continue using public transportation during the pandemic. So grocery store employees, retail workers and more. The leaders sent a letter to the mayor over the weekend. The New York Post reported about the letter, which says that no one should be afraid to use basic transit services, especially the men and women in their ranks who kept the city going during one of its darkest hours. They also reported that in the past year, 10 murders took place in the subway system. Before that, each year saw only 1 or 2 murders. That means it took 6 years for 10 to be killed, compared to just 1 year now. We asked New Yorkers how they feel about the safety in the subway system.
The homeless people, they sleep there, they sleep on the seats, they sleep on the subway station. It's unsafe and honestly, it's unsanitary.
It used to be worse. It used to be worse.
I've lived in New York City my whole life, and I've used the subway system my entire life, and I do think it's safe from what I experience.
So it kind of seems like New Yorkers are used to the violence in the city. The ones we talked to said they're not worried about taking the metro and they're gonna continue doing so. But some mentioned the increased presence of homeless people in the subway system. Arian Pazdar, NTD News, New York.
There's cultures that have been lost, but this culture hasn't been. The artist is showing us our sense of who we are, where we came from. You look at his hat. His hat is knitted probably by a man because a man traditionally knitted the hats. That hat tells you the story of who this person is, what his place in the culture is, the animals around him. Everything's all contained in the messages in the hat. And the tool that he's carrying over his shoulder. This is a centuries-old tool that has been able to rework the mountains. Those traditions are invaluable, and if we don't honor those traditions, then we're rootless. The artist is showing us the value of maintaining our culture and respecting our culture.
A group of parents are speaking out against schools that they claim are indoctrinating their children. They're calling on other parents to get more involved in their kids' education and to give more support. NTD's Don Tran has the details.
Indoctrination can come in many forms. Some say the most common form is through the public education system. Purple for Parents Indiana is taking this threat head on. Its founder, Jennifer McWilliams, used to be a teacher. She reportedly saw that education was focused on social and emotional learning rather than academics.
As the program became more implemented in our school, it began to take over more and more, so I started digging into what was really going on.
McWilliams says groups like Planned Parenthood and Black Lives Matter push for emotional and social learning, and they're invested in a one-world globalist agenda, which Purple for Parents Indiana says doesn't benefit the children. Rhonda Miller, who joined McWilliams' organization last year, says American education has a leftist bias and has also been promoting sexual immorality among students.
This book was brought to our attention. This is a workbook, a student workbook, from an online Apex health program that was at Fairfield High School, and they were teaching the kids anal and oral sex. There's talk about abortion, there's talk about lubrications, different sexual methods, and so it alarmed us.
Miller said middle schoolers have been exposed to it as well. Parents who took part in Purple for Parents meetings shared their first-hand experiences. One parent said her daughter became very upset after reading a passage from The Giver that showed infanticide. She was there to give her comfort and guidance, but says other children are not as lucky.
She was amongst other children at this special education school who do not have a moral compass, who had sexual dysphoria, who don't have a religious faith. And so those kids, how did that passage land on their minds where they may have behavioral difficulties?
When I had my daughter and we started looking into schools and understanding certain things, we started going, man, what's going on? And we used to think maybe just one here, a little bit here and there. And then the more we look, the more we realize, oh, this is this huge thing that we never were aware of.
In Idaho, state lawmakers passed a bill that prohibits schools from making students follow social justice and critical race theory. Don Tran, NTD News.
Pandemic lockdowns have left the youth restless, and some are turning to crime. One city in California is dealing with repeat juvenile offenders. We hear more from NTD's David Lamb.
Police are seeing a lot of juvenile crimes in Oakland, California, near San Francisco. Earlier this month, 2 children tried to rob a man. He grabbed one of them and threw him to the ground before they ran away. And more youths were involved in an armed robbery attempt on April 13th. They were arrested and released to their guardians. Police also arrested an 11-year-old, 12-year-old, and 2 14-year-olds for a separate carjacking. Some of them were the same from previous incidents. The Oakland police chief said he believes people as young as 10 years old were involved in robberies, thefts, and carjacking. He said, they don't have extracurricular activities, they don't have school, and so we just want to make sure that we give them some positive outlets. According to Oakland's crime report, the types of theft have shifted over the last year. Burglaries, which involve stealing from homes or other properties, went down from 4,000 to 2,000 incidents since last year, while robberies, which entail stealing what people are carrying, went up from 800 to 900. The cases have been referred to a juvenile justice center for prosecution. David Lamb, NTD News, California.
California can begin the process to recall Governor Gavin Newsom. Secretary of State Shirley Weber said they received more than 1.6 million verified signatures, which is more than the 1.5 million signatures needed to trigger the recall. People will have 30 days to withdraw their signatures if they want. A recall election will happen unless enough people withdraw their support to bring the threshold below 1.5 million. People are leaving the Windy City, or at least moving out of the urban area. An experienced local realtor talked to NTD about the factors influencing Chicago's real estate market.
People have begun to leave Chicago's city for its suburbs.
We definitely did see an uptick to people moving to the suburbs, but also an uptick to people moving to just neighborhoods that are not as highly dense.
Amy Duong Kim has been a realtor in the Chicago metropolitan area for 17 years. She says several factors have caused the uptick in sales.
I'm working with a couple, and they are two executives at corporations, and their companies have decided to work remotely indefinitely.
Kim says many homebuyers are looking for larger houses where everyone has their own workspace.
So when you have, dual working parents, also maybe children who are studying remotely, where everyone needs a workspace, it's definitely beneficial where everyone has a designated space.
Downtown businesses and restaurants closing their doors also led former residents outside the city. Kim said a decrease in office space has led to less people leading a metropolitan lifestyle.
So if that part of living in a metropolitan area is no longer in place, then I do think that people are looking to figure out a way to entertain in their own homes, or they would need more space.
But Kim points out that the lockdown wasn't the deciding factor in people moving to the suburbs. She says riots were a major cause of families leaving the metro area.
The crime that was happening during that time was, I think that it really shook that area very much.
Last August, rioting and looting raged through downtown Chicago for 3 days following George Floyd's death. But with all the homebuyers' reasons in mind, Kim does her best to focus on their long-term interests.
I always have them consider what their life was or what they wanted to be after the pandemic.
Real estate brokerage CBRE reported in April that Chicago downtown vacancy rose to almost 19%. This is the most in their 14 years of data.
A top European Union official said Sunday that Americans who have been vaccinated against the virus should be able to travel to Europe by summer, easing existing travel restrictions.
The European Union plans to open its doors to Americans who have been vaccinated by this summer. That's according to European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen on Sunday. She told the New York Times, quote, "The union's 27 members would accept unconditionally all those who are vaccinated with vaccines that are approved by the European Medicines Agency." Von der Leyen did not say when exactly travel could resume, but mentioned the agency has approved all 3 vaccines used in the U.S. It's been over a year since the EU largely shut down non-essential travel. Earlier this month, the EU agreed to launch vaccination travel passes to make travel easier for people who have been vaccinated, recovered from infection, or tested negative. Also on Sunday, the EU's vaccine task force chief said they are confident they will be able to produce enough vaccines to achieve its target for immunity of its adult population by the middle of July.
Scientists at the St. Louis Zoo Wildcare Park enlisted the help of turtle-detecting dogs to investigate a possible outbreak of a deadly disease.
It's something all dogs can understand, the thrill of the hunt. But these spaniels aren't going to harm their prey. In fact, they're here to help. But try telling the turtles that. At the St. Louis Zoo Wildcare Park, assessments of the turtles' health are done once a year. The 3 toad box turtles are nabbed, swabbed, and tagged. Scientists keep tabs on them until hibernation. It works well, in theory.
We've spent hundreds of hours looking for turtles, and we don't do it well because they hide, and they're good at hiding.
It would take weeks to search all 425 acres. Meanwhile, one man had the idea to train his dogs to find turtles.
And gradually, word just got around that I had turtle dogs.
Now the work's done in a matter of hours. The dogs know how to softly pick up the turtles and bring them to researchers. The 3 toad box turtles' numbers have been declining in recent years, but no one really knows much about them.
About their life histories, about their home ranges, and about the infectious diseases that are threatening them.
One disease called the ranavirus is particularly deadly for box turtles. This makes the health assessment even more important than before.
Where it is found in box turtles, it's caused mortality rates up to about 80%. So a real conservation concern if it is introduced into box turtle populations.
A case was recently found in the area, but don't worry. According to the St. Louis Zoo, it can't spread to the dogs. At the end of the day, the turtles are put back where they were found. The dogs seem almost proud of their work to help the turtles.
Coming up, an international Chinese restaurant chain denies sending its security footage back to China. And a Chinese priest is urging Pope Francis to speak up for China's orphans. That's as Beijing ramps up its crackdown on Catholics in the country. That and more on NTD News. A popular Chinese restaurant chain denies monitoring its customers. We previously reported on one of its Canada locations, which has been accused of sending security camera footage of customers back to China. NTD's Don Ma has more.
Chinese restaurant chain Haidilao is denying accusations that it is sending surveillance footage from overseas locations back to its headquarters in China. NTD reached out to a Haidilao restaurant supervisor in Vancouver, Canada.
I will not send the footage back to China.
News outlet Sunday Guardian Live first made the accusations. The Haidilao restaurant manager in Vancouver previously told NTD that their company's Chinese founder is able to see real-time security footage remotely, even across continents. The supervisor, however, refused to support the manager's statement in a phone call with NTD.
Please send an email to the company. I'm just an employee. I don't have the authority to answer your question.
Following the phone call, NTD emailed the headquarters of the Eatery in China and asked if Haidilao security camera footage from overseas locations is being sent to China, and whether the cameras are manufactured by a Chinese surveillance company with alleged ties to the Chinese military. The Haidilao headquarters did not respond before airtime. Amid these accusations, the Taiwanese branch of Haidilao came out with a statement separately last Thursday. They admitted that they were recording footage of their customers, but said it was for safety and customer service purposes. They also denied the footage will be sent to other locations or that they ever used facial recognition with the footage. The statement didn't seem to clear the controversy completely. Some Taiwanese netizens showed support for it, while some remained skeptical. Some netizens said that it's actually beneficial if the security footage is for safety purposes. Others said that it's up to customers to decide whether they choose to eat there or not. Netizens skeptical of the statement pointed out that the restaurant chain is a Chinese-funded enterprise, and some question whether the Taiwanese branch will be able to refuse sending the footage if the Chinese headquarters ever requested it. Another netizen pointed out that some of the restaurant's cameras are manufactured by a Chinese surveillance company with alleged ties to the Chinese military. A Taiwanese politician has also weighed in on this matter.
If a company has communist capital or a Chinese-funded background, it should be scrutinized over this in order to protect Taiwan's freedom and democracy.
The Haidilao restaurant chain was established in China's southwestern province of Sichuan in 1994. It's one of the largest restaurant chains in China, with more than 900 locations globally. They can be found in the US, Canada, Australia, the UK, and Taiwan, among other countries. According to Chinese law, companies in China are required to hand over information to the Chinese Communist Party, or CCP, if the party ever requested it. Don Ma, NTD News.
A Chinese priest is calling on the Pope to defend China's orphans. That's as Beijing escalates a new round of crackdowns on Chinese Catholics. NTD's Tiffany Meyer has more.
Now we turn to Beijing's latest crackdown on Chinese Catholics. A Chinese priest is urging Pope Francis to speak up for China's orphans. This comes as the Chinese regime shuts down Catholic orphanages in a northern Chinese province. Among those shut down is an orphanage called Liming Home. A staff member there says authorities ordered them to transfer all the orphans under 18 to state-run facilities. To protect her identity, we gave her a pseudonym, Zhao Li.
We have developed affections for these children while raising them, so to say goodbye all of a sudden is like cutting them off from us emotionally.
The orphanage was set up in the 1980s to take in abandoned children. Zhao says some of the orphans are disabled and often pass away before they are in their 30s.
It's like accompanying them through their life journey. Some children are pretty weak, and they are already pretty happy to be alive just for one more day.
Writing to a Catholic press agency under the pen name of Wen Dao, a Chinese priest says he is concerned there's more to the shutdown than it seems. He believes it is part of Chinese authorities' broader plan to reduce the influence of Catholic churches in China. China has about 12 million Catholics, and their churches are divided into two groups, the state-run ones and the underground ones. The state-run associations reject the Pope's authority, but the underground ones recognize it. Beijing has escalated crackdowns in both types in recent years. In some places, officials have removed crosses from churches and prevented believers from gathering. Aside from addressing the shutdown of orphanages, the priest also accuses Chinese officials of using the pandemic to tighten their grip on churches. He says Catholics across China report one common phenomenon. That is, authorities allow shopping malls and tourist attractions to open, but put churches under lockdown. And it's not just churches. The priest heard from some Chinese Catholics that some schools are checking students' and teachers' beliefs, and that some Catholic students were forced to drop out of school, while some teachers' careers were in jeopardy for being Catholic. The priest writes the goal is to turn schools into religion-free areas, making students and teachers realize that it is better to have no religion at all. The priest also expresses disappointment in a historic deal between the Vatican and Beijing. Many see the 2018 deal as an ice-breaking move. That's because Beijing has not had any official ties with the Vatican in almost 7 decades. The deal allows both Beijing and the Pope to appoint bishops in China. Following the deal, the Pope recognized 8 Chinese bishops Beijing appointed without his approval. The Chinese priest says many churchgoers in China cheered the deal because they thought the situation would improve. But what happened later proved the opposite. After that, authorities tore down many churches. They ordered every church to hang flags to promote the Communist Party's ideology, and those under 18 can't take part in church activities. The priest says when this happened, the Chinese churches hoped to get support from the Vatican, but the Holy See has remained silent. He says, like the orphans, Catholics in China are a minority, and they only have the weakest of voices in the face of injustice, and he'd like to ask the Pope one question. Can you hear the weakest and truest voices of the Church in China?
Coming up, Falun Gong practitioners held a peaceful protest outside the Chinese embassy in London, marking the anniversary of a historic event in China. Find out more in just a moment here on NTD News. Meditators on Sunday stood opposite the Chinese embassy in London, marking a moment that would later shape events in modern-day China. Here's NTD's Jane Werrell with more.
Facing the Chinese embassy, Falun Gong practitioners hold a peaceful protest. For many, it's a familiar sight, but just over a couple of decades ago, this spiritual practice was little known. That changed on the 25th of April, 1999, when 10,000 Falun Gong practitioners turned up at the central government building in Beijing, peacefully protesting for their right to practice their faith in Falun Gong's principles of truth, compassion and tolerance. But less than 3 months later, the Chinese Communist Party instigated its notorious persecution against Falun Gong. That's why people are protesting here 22 years later. They say that the peaceful April 25th appeal in 1999 was manipulated to justify a brutal persecution. The hatred, propaganda and torture continues to this day.
I don't have my mom in my life many years.
Xiaotong's mother is still jailed in China for her faith.
My parents divorced because of my father was threatened by the company, because if my parents still keep practicing Falun Gong, they will lose their jobs. So my mom has been in jail and lost her job already, so my father is really scared about this.
The Chinese human rights lawyer who tried to help her mother be released from jail was stripped of his license. Many families have been forced apart by the persecution. Ming Huiyu's mother was jailed again recently.
She was talking to a person about her belief. The student reported her as a Falun Gong practitioner. I feel very sad for what happened to my mom again.
Among those marking the April 25th protest was fashion model Pooja Moore.
We are here to say we need a freedom of our conscience, and we should be able to believe in anything that we want to. If you're not even allowed to believe in truthfulness, compassion and forbearance, which stands for everything good in the world, then what else do you believe in?
This year there's a little more distance and some face masks, but every April the 25th, as long as the persecution hasn't ended, these meditators will be facing the Chinese embassy, appealing for freedom of belief. Jane Werrell, NTD News, London.
Coming up, one of the most common foods in the world takes months to make. Just how does chocolate go from a bean to a bar? And a region of Italy covered in yellow flowers for just a few weeks each year. Stay tuned to see more. A chocolate bar is one of the most common snacks out there, but a surprising amount of work goes into one. NTD's Sapphire Quarter gives us all a golden ticket as we have a look inside a chocolate factory.
Go to the store, pick out a tasty bar of chocolate, pay a few bucks and eat it. Simple. But the process of making chocolate is anything but easy. First, cocoa beans are harvested, fermented and dried. It can be 3 weeks after they're picked before they even reach the factory. Next, the beans have to be turned into chocolate liquor. Half of a cocoa bean is cocoa butter.
The other half is cocoa mass, which is the flavor of the chocolate, you know, the dark brown part.
The two parts of the bean have to be separated through grinding. The leftover cocoa mass is called liquor or cocoa powder, but you still wouldn't want to eat it. Next, it is placed in a conch, and sugar is added. While that may seem like the end, it is only the beginning. Every chocolate brand then adds different ingredients to make their candies unique. Milk is mixed in to make milk chocolate, and creamy fillings are added. Maribel Chocolates makes lavender chocolate.
We take the lavender flowers, you know, mix it with the cream, and we leave it overnight. So it's a nice aroma. The next day we mix it with the chocolate.
The look of the chocolate is also important. Brands put a lot of effort into the shapes and colors their chocolates become.
It's out of work, but it pays, because what I like people to feel is happiness, not only that they're going to eat chocolate. I want them to delight their eyes.
Months of processing, thousands of miles, and dozens of people. All for a few quick bites. Sapphire Quarter, NTD News.
A beautiful carpet of yellow flowers is covering parts of the Italian countryside. They herald in spring with a joyous burst of color.
Fields of yellow rapeseed flowers are blooming in Italy's Umbria region. This spectacular view only lasts for a few weeks in April. Once the flowers have died away, rapeseed oil will be made from the seeds. Umbria is known as the Green Heart of Italy, with a nearby village also putting on a fantastic display of cornflowers, daisies, and poppies a bit later in the season. For the moment, people have been enjoying getting out to see the vibrant colors and to appreciate the change of seasons.
The rapeseed that is in flower these days is just charming. It has really become a paradise even for many keen photographers. It is really beautiful to see it.
One local resident also says the flowers seem to bloom more beautifully this year.
Other years there were flowers, but not like this. This year there are many more fields and it is much more beautiful.
For truck drivers lucky enough to have a route that passes through the yellow fields, it is a welcome change from the boring gray motorway.
The aurora borealis lit up the skies of Alaska recently as the end of the aurora season draws near. Eyewitness footage captured last Tuesday shows the stunning natural phenomenon illuminating Fairbanks, a city in Alaska. It's known for its optimal northern lights viewing due to its location in the so-called Aurora Oval. Andy Whitman, who filmed the spectacle, says the residents see the light displays on average 3 or 4 nights a week between August and April. And that's all for today's news. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Stephanie Cox.